Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today, let's talk about jerkbaits, because the last tournament on Lake Eufaula, Oklahoma, that is, I actually feel like I learned a lot more about how versatile these baits are and how we're pretty much not fishing them to their max potential, because up until like the last couple years, where you've seen live scope really bring back a jerkbait to the forefront in all different seasons, I mostly considered it a cold water presentation. A bait like this sucker right here. Of course, this is the Mega Bass 110, this was it's just kind of standard for pre-spawn cold water type fishing, and that's pretty much all I used it for. But recently, I've really started to realize that there is a lot more time of the year and a lot more situations that I can throw a jerkbait. So just a little bit of a backstory on this last tournament. So I'm fishing my traditional, summertime power fishing tactics, shallow water deal. I mean, that's what I like to do, right? And I'm struggling at Lake Eufaula during practice, especially, really actually during the tournament too. But during practice, I'm struggling to even just get bites. And then one of my buddies that I'm rooming with, he mentions that he's catching them on a jerkbait just like this. And so I'm like, gosh, man, during the summer and, the water's kind of dirty, like, it just doesn't make any sense. Well, I ended up taking it out, testing it out, and caught quite a few fish on it. It was insane, and obviously I needed to have like bait fish present. So like having a lot of shad was kind of a key. And that's why the fish were eating it so well. But it was also something that they're just not seeing all that much during the summertime. So I think that factored into it too. And so ended up catching, I think, between practice and the tournament, I caught, I don't know, 60, 70 fish or something like that. Just didn't catch many keepers during the tournament, obviously. But that doesn't mean that I don't think that I was onto something, or my friend was onto something. It was definitely a very, very strong bite. I think if it wasn't the opens, where you've got a lot of pressure and a lot of people are sore mouthing fish over 5 days of practice, I think it would be a completely different deal. But anyways, let's talk a little bit about some of the scenarios that I experienced at Eufaula. So the primary areas that we were catching fish, I say we, my buddy Chris with 44tackle.com, he was the one that kind of happened upon this pattern. But when I started kind of figuring out the areas where I could get bit, it tended to be, big chunk rock that went from the bank out to like 6 or 8 feet of water. And the water was fairly clear. It wasn't like super dirty or anything like that. It would fluctuate from day to day depending on how much rain we got the previous day or that specific day. But in general, I think you were getting like a foot and a half of visibility, which isn't bad. And so we were throwing a little Mega Bass 110 Junior. Let's see if I can find it. All right, so this one right here. So this was one of the baits that we caught them on right here. Just the smaller size. It doesn't go quite as deep, but that even that color was pretty good, especially when it was cloudy. But after I started catching fish in that somewhat clear water, it all made sense. I mean, to me, a jerkbait is, if it's not just a pre-spawn or cold water bait, it's definitely a clear water presentation. But something happened on the first day of the tournament that really started to make me rethink my feelings about the optimal conditions for a jerkbait. And that was when I was fishing some of the dirty water. I was running up north to a bridge that had a lot of current. On Eufaula, all those bridges really condensed the current that was running on the lake. And in this situation, I was fishing this bridge that the riprap You know, there was some shad spawning on the riprap, and I'd caught them, you know, fairly decent on a chatterbait, because it's really, really muddy water. I'm talking about maybe this much visibility, 6 inches or something like that. And I caught him on a chatterbait in a square bill, and so I figured that would be kind of the way to do it. So I started down that bank, down that riprap, with a chatterbait, and I noticed that I had some what felt like bites, but I wasn't 100% sure. It was like something, you know, put slack in the chatterbait for just a split second, and it was right on the point of this riprap. Right where the mouth of the, you know, that cut through is, and so I didn't catch anything on the chatterbait there, but I got a couple little pushes, and so I was just like, huh, that was kind of weird. So after I fished that stretch of riprap with the chatterbait, I caught 1 3 1/4, which was my best fish during the tournament. I came back around and remembered that there was that. You know, I got a couple bites on that point. So just on a whim, I'm like, let's see what the jerkbait will do. And I ended up pulling out a jerkbait. It was actually a Lucky Craft pointer, but ended up losing that one. So the first one I was throwing was a Lucky Craft pointer, very similar to this color right here. This is actually a Jackal. But I picked this up, a real opaque, kind of whitish colored jerkbait, and started working that, and immediately started catching fish right on the same exact spot that I'd missed those fish on a chatterbait. I really didn't even get an opportunity at them. They were just kind of swiping at it, I think. But I ended up catching another keeper, caught several non-keepers that were just not measuring, which was par for the course that day. And my co-angler, while I was measuring one of my non-keepers, he caught a good 2 1/4 pounder fishing a jerkbait. And I mean, that is the muddiest water by far that I've ever fished one of these baits before. And so it really opened my eyes at how good this bait can be in dirtier water, and we just don't give it credit for that. So this right here, the ones that I was using the entire time are either you know, suspending models or slow sinking models. Now I also had one of the juniors that I was getting bid on. Just that one specifically ended up having a little bit more buoyancy and you know, would float a little bit. But other than that, they're mostly suspending is kind of what I was looking for out of a bait. So one of the key things that I found when fishing the muddy water with the jerk baits was the cadence had to be a little bit different. You know, usually in the clear water, I'm all about keeping it moving, you know, short pauses. You know, if it's real clear, I'll lengthen up the pauses a little bit. But in this situation, the pauses, you know, were really, really critical in the muddy water. Number one, I wanted a jerkbait that also had some pretty good rattles, you know, some rattles that would really call them in and get their attention. Then I wanted a opaque or matte style finish, you know, that really showed up in that dirtier water. But I think more than anything, the length of the pause was the most important, because the fish that I did catch, I would, you know, work that bait maybe twice and then pause it for, you know, I think it was like 10, 15 seconds, which is an eternity when you're working a jerkbait. So letting it just sit there. And I'm not sure exactly if the fish just need the extra time to be able to locate the bait or what, but it really, really seemed to be important that bait just kind of sit there for a long period of time, just like you would in really, really cold conditions. So, you know, that just goes to show you that the jerkbait is just, I think we're just scratching the surface on the potential of a jerkbait. You know, again, we always think of it as a clear water bait or cold water bait, but I learned at Eufaula that you can for sure use it in the dirty water. It just, maybe you have to adjust your presentation a little bit. So it may not be a bad idea if you're fishing a dirty water area where the fish are related to current, or they're feeding on shad, or all of the above, and you work through it with traditional, muddy water techniques that are supposed to imitate shad. And then after you're done, try it with a jerkbait and see if you can pick off a few more fish. So just wanted to share that experience with you guys. I thought it was interesting, and it's something I'm going to be experimenting with more. That is kind of the key right now, because I feel like recently I haven't really started to expand or kept expanding on the things that are kind of trends and new baits and things like that. So that is kind of like my main focus, is to go out there and learn new things. And so learning a little bit more about the jerkbait is definitely one of those things I want to do. So anyways, guys, thought I'd just mention that. One thing I do want to mention is, if you guys are coming down to the Tennessee River and you want to go on a guide trip, for years, I haven't really done much guiding. But now that I'm fishing the opens and really going out there and putting forth an effort to learn how to utilize live scope and forward-facing sonar to its max potential, I figured, I'd go ahead and start guiding a little bit more. So we've got a lot of guide trip openings for this fall, November and December, specifically out on Lake Chickamauga and Watts Bar. So if you guys are interested at all, make sure you send me an email at sonar@sonarfishing.com. We'll get you booked, and we'll have a lot of fun. That is a pretty good time of the year to fish Chickamauga and some of these other lakes, depending on the weather patterns. But in general, I think it's a really cool time of the year. There's a lot of new things that happen, a lot of shad movement and things like that. But anyways, just wanted to mention that. Other than that, that's all I got. I'm going to see you guys out on the water. Make sure that you trust the process.